MG was a friendly factory. I always looked forward to going to work. The fact that people were enjoying and coming back to us, that was great. But I never thought where it would go after I retired. They'd all said, you've got to put all this down, because they kept asking questions and I kept giving them answers that they didn't know anything about. So they said, well, you've got to write it all down. I said, okay, one day I'll do that. So it's a bit of a personal book. It encapsulates all the things that happened over the time and things I never thought about at the time as being relevant to later. But also it's to say thank you for all the people I worked with who helped me over the years. I was a grammar school boy from Abingdon, so near enough MG all those years ago. I won a scholarship to college, but it was during the war, so I went straight into an apprenticeship in aircraft design. So I worked on aircraft design all through the war. So I was drafting all sorts of things, all sorts of sizes, back into the car industry after the war, when we pulled all the tools out of the car park, the die park, where they'd been greased up and put away for the war, pulled them all back out and restarted on things like the Hillman Mink and the Austin, and we'd even done some work for Ford. And I stayed at Presteel, Oxford, from my apprenticeship onwards, became from a detailed draftsman to a layout draftsman to a designer on car bits and pieces. And there was an advert for MG, and I answered that. I went and was interviewed by Sid Enover and Jim O'Neill, and they said, when can you start? So I started in 1956 at MG. Well, my interest was putting lines on paper. I was a draftsman, and so when you actually develop lines out from body shapes, you have to put all the things like highlights in and all the curves in, and you work with all sorts of curves. And I'd worked on 2 or 3 cars, and then suddenly we had a set of body lines come in for the Jaguar XK 120. And I thought, well, this looks really smashing. So I really thought, well, that's the way you've got to go, where there are big flowing lines. And that really triggered my interest. That was up to them. I've been telling people ever since that the bloke really responsible for the MGB was Sid Enover, my boss. Completely underrated guy in the car industry, but absolutely a super guy. And he was the guy who did the MGA, the big jump from the vertical radiator to the streamlined shapes. And so I came in to do a replacement of the MGA. And I did 2 or 3 coupe bodies on the same chassis, but decided it wasn't the way to go because it was getting too heavy. And so because of my experience, I presume, and Roy Brocklehurst and I talked to Sid, and we decided we had to go monocoque construction, which is where the MGB came from. It was the first time that, a sports car at that time, an open sports car, had been done, designed just purely on a platform base, effectively, with all the welding that was needed for it. And all the other cars, the Hillman tried it, and they had to put cross braces under van chassis, all sorts of things like that. Whereas we started out with a big strong chassis and platform, and it started out as a tourer with the idea that the GT could be done later. Well, I've been talking and giving talks to people, first of all around Abingdon and in the car club, and then I got invited out to Africa. I met Norman Ewing, and he said, come out and give us a talk. And I've been to South Africa twice. I was invited out to America to give a talk and a lecture with slides, which I've got, and I've been to Australia as well, to Adelaide, to meet up with them. They'd all said, you've got to put all this down, because they kept asking questions and I kept giving them answers that they didn't know anything about. So they said, well, you've got to write it all down. I said, okay, one day I'll do that, and I kept my notes and all the rest of it, and it's really gone from there. And I thought I'd like to do the book from the inside, how the design problems came up and what we did about it, but also it's to say thank you from all the people I worked with who helped me over the years. MG was a friendly factory, you know, and we just wanted to go on. But the great thing was we could go to anywhere in the car industry, and if you came from MG, you got help, no question. They were always ever so willing to do something for you, make a prototype, do you some bits which are special, and then offer them back to you, and it really worked that way very well. I'd done panel sets and all sorts of things, so I knew how to draw shapes and things, and I knew how to glue things together, spot welding and all the rest of it, and the jigs necessary. So it was with that sort of knowledge, I was able to stick the MGB together, starting with an outer sill, for instance. But you know you need strength under the door, because there ain't anything else. If you look at an MGB with the doors open, there's just a platform, you know. And so you've got to put a box girder down the sill. Sid looks at this and said, yeah, that's fine, except you want a web in the middle and with a Warren girder pressing structure all down the sill. So all those sort of things came back from our knowledge of pressings. I did about 4 or 5 models, and the shape gradually evolved, and I could see where I was getting a nice clean shape all the way through. If you look also in the book, I've asked you to print something off which you may find difficult, and that is, there is a picture of the 181 record breaker, a little one, and superimposed inside it is the MGB. It fits in there perfectly, except you rounded off the bit for the nose and chopped a bit off the tail lights. No, I always look forward to going to work, you know, and the fact that people were enjoying and coming back to us, that was great. But I never thought where it would go after I retired. No idea at all. It's a bit of a personal book in that I've had to write it in the first person, because that's the way it was done, the way I've lectured, and I've just used those lectures. I guess that the book hopes it encapsulates all the things that happened over the time, and things I'd never thought about at the time as being relevant to later. You don't know where it's going. There's a little letter, for instance, in there I quoted. There was a lady, I grabbed hold of at Silverstone, and they found I was the guy. They come up to me and say whatever, and this lady came up to me and she said, that's my car over there, you see. Did you see it on the production line when it was being built? And I thought, out of 150 a day, no chance. Well, I said, well, I have to say, well, I may have done. I was always walking around the production line.